So a CTO, the dean of the academy, a strategist, and a few enterprise technologists walk into a bar to debate ERP. How about that?
Couldn't get more exciting.
What's that?
Couldn't get more exciting.
No, I think it's, so listen, this has been a topic, in my role I spend a lot of time with a lot of you in the C-suite in the boardroom talking about emerging technology, and they expect the conversation to be anchored around AI agents, physical AI, quantum, what's coming next. Every one of them I bring back to the importance of the core in the equation, because we see this convergence between front, middle, and back office in all the ambitions we have, and you can't do AI unless you actually embed it in core business process and operations. So this is such an important topic, but I think it's one that there's different opinions about where it's heading, what it means, and what we should do, and we're gonna try to dig into it here. So let's start with this idea of, we call this ERP reimagined. So maybe for you, what's the definition of ERP these days in your mind? Like, how should we be talking about it? Let's level set a bit.
Yeah, and I think I love that we just went after Aaron, right? Because he teed up the conversation so perfectly. And it's our belief, we've been having a lot of dialogue about this, right, Jerry, as a team, about the role of ERP. We entered the last year with a lot of kind of hype and speculation about what the world of AI and the role of ERP looks like. Yeah. And to me, I think now that the market has settled, there's really this real belief that there is a role and a need for systems of record. We just heard in the world where unstructured data may not be as important, but contextual data still is important. And the reliability of the data and the importance of a core, clean foundation in order to really realize the value out of that agentic AI layer that'll be sitting with the ERP system. So to me, that was like a real kind of aha moment as we've had this conversation throughout the year.
Yeah, and Jerry, just stay on this side for a second. How has that evolved in this last year? I mean, we shifted it from a very, okay, it's back office, it's package tech, it's a bit into a more strategic framing. Are you seeing that play out or no?
Yeah, I mean, we see this as a super exciting time. If you think about the ERPs of the past, ERP started in the 1970s with the MRP systems that answer the question of what. Yeah. What is the transaction? It's a system of record. It's a historical view. And where we're seeing the ecosystem evolve, and it is an ecosystem play now, it's an evolution to be able to answer the question of why. Being able to ingest data, be able to be a system of record, but then also something that it can evolve to do analytics and then take the action from the ERP. That's something that's really come on scene over the last 18 to 24 months.
Okay, Dave, let's take the strategist lens on it. We're saying that it needs to be reimagined, which means we're going from something to something. How are you seeing it? Is it the same or a different perspective of where are we in this moment in time, and how do you think we need to continue to advance the dialogue on it?
We've gone to everyone and say, rip out all of your systems right now and replace everything. No, not that far. No. So there's been a lot of conversations during Aaron's talk, and then so hit it, and so did Jerry, that on the one hand, you can achieve tremendous productivity, 4x that Aaron was talking about in terms of some new development, in terms of, but if you listen to Aaron carefully, he carefully differentiated between those engineers who are working on the front ends of Box, sales engineering, other areas, but he said that's not where we deploy things on, let's say, core missions or things that are mission critical. And so Jerry mentioned it as well, which is I see all ERPs, the foundation of that is transaction integrity. If the order shipped and it says so in the ERP, it really has shipped. And so where ERP is going, that doesn't mean you can't AI this, it means you need to get the collection, it means an evolution of what an ERP is. And from being an integrated set of applications to integrated agents that maintain that transaction integrity.
I love that. Okay, Parth, from an AI and data, if we believe that reasoning, business logic, more and more of that could be something that we expect our models and our agents to be doing more of, how would you define ERP starting from scratch today, looking for tomorrow? Like, Ashwin, what do you think? How would you?
You can call me Parth.
I know.
By the way, I'm fine. I'm the agentified version of it. So look, I think the world of ERP, as So and Jerry mentioned, is evolving. I also feel like enterprises are moving towards a cross-value chain value recognition from an AI standpoint. Yeah. Meaning, most decisions in organizations require more than just ERP. You've got your PLM systems, you've got inventory planning, you've got procurement systems. So there is a whole technology stack of applications. And as we see the evolution and this notion of system of record, which is somewhat fragmented across the enterprise, because a part number could exist in 5 different applications outside the ERP, that is where I think what AI and data for the future, right, is going to require to focus on, so that as we think about the knowledge base and the context libraries, how do we think about it beyond what sits in any individual applications? So I feel that that's where some of that interconnectivity across the applications is going to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
We get this question a lot, Bill, in terms of how should we be thinking about and designing for ERP in this world of AI and all the new innovations. And I think you said it, it's designing for convergence. That's like the key word, right? In terms of how they coexist and what is the balance between your transactional system of record, the agentic layer, all of the different tools that kind of wrap around it. And to me, at least with the clients that we've been talking to, the journey of finding that balance, because at the end of the day, you're just trying to get optimized value for the investment you're putting in, right? Has been a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, and so go with it, because so many of the investments, at the end of the day, it had well-defined scope, and the convergence maybe that we hoped we'd get at the end of the journey didn't always get fully realized because realities came in. We had budget, we had timelines, we had quarterly results we had to hit. So the potential, I think, was always there to do something more when we'd go and invest so much in these platforms that are very capable, but they had limitations.
Yep.
We almost don't have a choice anymore, Jerry, right? If the game here is convergence and how this all comes together, that approach can't hold.
Yeah, what's interesting is I think if you take yourself back to your university courses, if you took W. Edwards Deming and Total Quality Management, it still resonates today, where you need to plan, you need to act, you need to test, and then you need to execute. And what AI actually brings, both in the ERP space as well as the converged AI capability, is those 4 principles still maintain the importance. You need governance around that to actually execute. But then what's different is the velocity of execution, the velocity of change to actually keep the course, to not only execute faster, but then to have something that's resilient and makes an impact to answer that question of why are you actually trying to achieve the result.
But I'd like to do a build on that, which is you were mentioning it's a lot about speed. And the reason some of these ERP programs didn't necessarily get to their destination was what Aaron was talking about before. It was the people, not the systems. Yeah. The capabilities were there, but the business evolved faster than we could reconfigure the processes and clean the data.
Yep.
So what if that same productivity improvement happens, but for the people who are working on these systems? Can you get the overall enterprise and the extended enterprise to keep better in sync with the changing needs of business? And that's an exciting possibility.
Totally. Yeah. I think the other piece of it is, and we were going to go down a path later on, if we just take the path of the investments we're making in core ERP, now AI and agents, if we just take the existing processes and we incrementally try to put technology on top of them, the good chances we're going to weaponize inefficiency. Potentially. We're not going to get the full potential. So Aaron mentioned, it's been a theme throughout, this idea of reimagining business and process. As that applies to finance and supply chain and HR, the traditional purview of the ERP platform, I mean, that's the promised land, but it's also rife with risk, and we haven't necessarily done it before. So how do you see that piece of the puzzle playing out? Making sure we don't get trapped in this cycle of we're going to be beholden to how we've always thought about individual business process and workflow in this moment of potential reinvention. But
yeah, and look, So and Jerry can attest to this, right? But most ERP transformations that are happening today, whether they are upgrades, whether they are new deployments, they're all broader transformations than just the ERP.
Yeah.
And what's happening as part of those broader transformations is as you are thinking about driving ERP, which is a massive change in any enterprise, as you're trying to drive some of that standardization across your business and across your value chains, there is a notion of what other applications are in context. So I like the word that So used, right, which is this whole aspect of convergence architecture is going to drive the new way of thinking, because not only are you reimagining processes within a function, but you are reimagining processes across functions. Right. We were talking about that in our breakout, in our agentic breakout, right? How traditionally you've had a sales and marketing team do price optimization or market sensing, and you've had supply chain do demand planning and inventory planning and production planning.
Yeah.
Well, those two are obviously connected. SAP, Oracle, all these ERP systems were connecting these value streams in a certain way. But as you think about Kinaxis and Era and all these other technologies that are in the mix, those all operated independently. More and more, you're going to see that convergence, and some of that convergence is going to be driven by AI agentic capabilities.
Yeah, the data that actually supports what you're talking, Ashwin, is if you were to talk to Gartner, their forecast is that the ERP market will be a $140 billion market by 2030. It's only $65 billion today. The way that we will get there is not by SAP and Oracle alone just doing their own thing. It's by the explosion of the ecosystem. And the orchestration that needs to happen to get there is going to be accelerated through AI capabilities.
Yeah, and
but
Jerry,
governance is going to be critical to actually know what you're trying to achieve to get there, or you'll have kind of the ERP disasters of the past where people spend a lot of time and energy without governance and rails to actually get there.
Silo without necessarily, and you said so, you opened with this idea of the system of reasoning versus the system of record. And I think that has to include orchestration across the broader landscape. And Jerry, you mentioned it, the vendors are all open in mindset, business model, and architecture in a way that they hadn't been necessarily before. But how important is that?
I mean, I think that's the future, because we talk a lot about the role of ERP being the system of record, but if you think about the kind of layers around it, and we talk about the agents, right?
Yeah.
We're in this space race right now with everybody building agents. Again, without context, the alliance partners are building their own agents, all the SIs are building their agents, our clients are building their agents, and I think we're going to get to a point where we just have a saturation in the market. And so then going back to the core foundations of understanding the how is important, and we can geek out about the how, but like really at the end of the day, it's about what are we trying to solve for and why is it important, right, to our business? And so being able to have that end-to-end, cross-enterprise, cross-business knowledge of the intended outcomes that you're trying to drive, and then the knowledge to be able to then string together, design for, and orchestrate that agentic layer along with ERP and the other ecosystem, I think that's going to be the big driver of kind of the future.
I think the other thing about reimagine is going to come to even financial models that you see with the ERPs and their peripheral partners.
Yeah.
Where there is an element of reducing friction of the cost to run the ERP to run the AI agents. We're already seeing with this with some of the ERPs and the analytics companies where they have no egress fee between data migration between system to system. At the end of the day, the question is how do you deploy your cost of capital the best way as an enterprise? And it's not just about the shiny object of the engineering, it's also making it financially viable.
See, this is also going to be very interesting as you move from the proof points where early agents are going to be more in that training more. So as you go from assistance to augmentation to autonomy, you get to that point where because agents can be outcome focused and driven, through follow-on tasks or actions, you're now going to get to the point where your decisioning and action from the decisioning is going to be combined into that agentic and AI layer, which is very different than the way things worked in the past, where the job of AI was largely providing human augmentation or assistance.
Yep.
So to me, that's the transition that's yet to come in many organizations, but that's where we are headed.
But that's also why we're talking about this, because can your company's system of agents innovate faster than the ERP vendors? Because that's why you buy an ERP, because you're buying pre-configured processes and ways of doing things. So that's a natural, interesting strategic tension in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Nate, when we're talking business case and the investment that's required to be able to make all of this real, is the anchor point modernization? Is the anchor point modularization? Is it augmentation? Like, as we think about how do we want to frame the next core modernization wave to bring all of these pieces into play, what's the pitch, especially to the CEO and the board?
That's a pretty simple one. It's having done a lot of research and a lot of cases on this, it's very, very hard to make a business case work around modernization. It's simply not there in the math. You can put the right resources through to labor arbitrage and through normal automation where you don't need to just do a modernization of the core. What is really there is a capabilities pitch, and can we move faster? Can we take ourselves either out of a problem where we can't report our financials accurately, or are we in a situation where we can multiply our factory efficiency or whatever drives your enterprise by having a consistent back office and front office capability set? And that's where I think it's important. Jerry took us all the way back to the 70s with MRP. What is an ERP is a question that has to be asked. And if you say what ERPs have evolved into, in my view, is the prepackaged set of infrastructure software that provides that transaction integrity. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
ERPs evolved to involve HR, supply chain, procurement, everything in your enterprise, potentially not including the front office, but even that's edging in there as well. If you can make a business case by having that better integrated and put in the same place, that's where you can make the sale. But the interesting thing is that's not different with AI. If you could do that same transformation without what we call ERP, that what you buy from the marketplace, you can still make the same business case work. So again, interesting times in which we're all at.
Yeah.
I think I was going to say, I think the other point is it's a gateway. It's a conduit to the transformation. Like, I don't want to use so many consulting words, but at the end of the day, it is a gateway, right? Because if you don't have that foundational data layer right, then any kind of optimization or efficiencies that you're trying to get on top of it, I mean, what good is it to automate inefficient processes or bad processes, right? At the end of the day, I think that's kind of it may not be as, jazzy as what you just said, but I think it is that foundational layer that is so important in trying to drive the real value out of the AI.
Yeah, and this, Nate, you open with kind of being pithy about ripping out core systems and replacing them. Jerry, you mentioned the Gartner fact about the market growing. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago. It was the Wing VC conference, and they asked a room like this, and maybe we can do it with this room. How many of you are actively looking to take core pieces of what your ERP and rip it out to custom build it or replace it with AI? And in that room, there was one hand, and the only hand that was the vendor that was building an AI-based supply chain process, which was pretty self-serving, and they boldly, maybe bring the lights up for a second. In this room, how many are actively spending capital on taking core systems and processes and replacing them or rebuilding them from scratch, custom? Any brave hands? One in the room. Just fascinating, but I think there's a headline too. So this would be great over scotches later tonight to talk exactly about where that is and how that's going. But it is something that's on every CEO's mind.
But Bill, I'll add something to that. So core facts and data. From my work over the last 6 months, of all the existing large established mid-cap and larger companies, there isn't a lot of work that you've just described, proved by your poll.
Yeah.
However, for startups, it's a different conversation. And for those startups, companies that are either spinning out or going in a different place, the first thing we hear from all of them is, we don't want the mothership's ERP. It's got 30 years of history that we don't want to untangle. It's got 30 years of exception cases that we don't need. We want to start fresh, clean, and agile.
Yeah.
Now that's the interesting question.
Yeah.
To So's point, can you get fresh, clean, and agile out of the box from one of the major vendors, or can you do it faster yourself? That's a really hard question, because you might say fresh, clean, and agile doesn't sound like an ERP, but there's a lot you need to do to make sure an order operates internationally from Japan to the US, compliant with all the tax laws, finance requirements, and everything else. And you could sit there and train your agents to do that, but are you doing your mission as a core enterprise, or are you starting to build your own ERP?
Right.
And that's where the business case swings back to buy versus build.
Yeah, and it comes back to the why. Jerry, what's the biggest risk right now in over reimagining? We're saying this in a hopeful tone of the possibility, but what's the risk that you've seen in going too far in this?
Well, I mean, it's focusing on the shiny objects, right? We've heard about organizations struggling with the return on investment of AI, and we would argue that number one is ERP is no longer just the one vendor footprint, number one. Number two, it is the ecosystem orchestration. Number three, those organizations that want to move fast, keep the core clean of ERP, the foundational capabilities of your organization, and then innovate at the edge. And then in terms of where you choose to innovate, it's those areas that have friction issues, velocity issues, speed and value to actually execute. And then I guess the final chapter is before you go in, know the why. right? Prioritize why you're doing it, and that's both from a people perspective, so people understand their role in the orchestration, but also to understand the return that you're expecting from the business.
And so who's the idea champion inside the organization? Do we see a pattern of if we have this executive that's the one leading the charge and sponsoring, that there's a higher chance of success?
I mean, I think it's now everybody owns, right? In terms of the themes that we just talked about, with the impact it has across the enterprise and bringing together. So I would say it is the entire C-suite. It no longer belongs with the CIO or right?
Yeah.
So, and we talk about this, it may feel a little self-serving because we run the ERP practice, but we really do believe, in terms of the question you asked about over-indexing, ERP is being redefined. We absolutely agree, but it's not being retired. And I think companies that don't understand that concept and over-index on investment otherwise, that's where you find yourself, right, in a kind of different type of hole than maybe they were 10 years ago.
Whether it's AI or ERP, I mean, we still have the perspective of, to have a North Star, there needs to be alignment of the executive suite, so that they can set priorities, so that as you're actually defining the scope, you actually define it based on the urgency of the issue that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, I think it goes, I love Aaron's final thoughts about never been a better time to be a chief data AI, CIO, CTO, and all the but it can't just be that org's mission here, especially if we're talking about true process and product and market reinvention. All right, Ashton, so how do you think about where we embed more intelligence? Is it decentralizing it across into data fabric and spines with agents that could speed across? Does it lead to more investment in intelligence in the core data, in the core systems? Is it a combination? Where's your...
Look, I think it is a combination, because as So said, there is an aspect of agility that comes with AI, but it needs to be sitting on a standard foundation that helps drive trust, that helps drive repeatability, that helps drive the right context across the organization.
Yeah.
So to me, thinking about AI agnostic of an ERP platform, there is a high risk amount associated with that, right? Yes, it gives you agility, but that this agility doesn't come necessarily with the right standardization and governance that sits underneath to support it. So to me, it is a balance. It is something that needs to be considered, because I think Aaron talked about the horizontalization of architecture, especially as you think about applying agentic. To me, governance becomes an underpinning thing when you think about that horizontal, architecture interoperability, because without that, you're going to have some level of that, delineated and decentralized to a point where it's unmanageable.
And removed from core process
That's right.
operations, which is the whole point we need more of.
It also comes down to choices too, right? Like you said. So I think we talked about we're never going to out ERP an ERP company, right? So in terms of where you place your value, again, just because you can, it doesn't mean you should. And if you agree that systems of record still matter for regulated industries and publicly traded companies, it's about the bets that you make and how you're going to drive your investment. So I think that's a really important point in what you just said. The layer exists in every part of the stack, but where are you placing your bets and investing so that you can drive the organizational outcomes that you're trying to drive is a really important question.
But also in input, you're not isolated here as a company. You can give input to the ERP market and say, this is what I need, and this is what I'm expecting. I'm expecting the ERP of 2025 is completely different from the ERP of 2035. And if those vendors don't innovate, well, that's a choice they're making. And I could see things, and unfortunately history is littered with companies who make bad choices. So it will be interesting to see how it plays out. And also, who knows, maybe one of you out here in the audience is going to start an ERP company and agent it up and have 10x productivity and be able to take over the market.
I love it. When we were preparing for this, it brought me back. In 2012, we had a tech trend about the end of the death of ERP. And the point was to say, let's be past that argument. It got misquoted in so we had to have a lot of revisions about, no, Deloitte's not saying ERP is dead in 2012. And it's obviously still an active discussion. Today, we're going to be here in the showcase and with drinks later. So come and continue the dialogue, and thank you, panel. Awesome.
Yeah.
Talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.